everyone, I'm Annalisa from C.A.C. Global Solutions. We're an aircraft management company and welcome to our YouTube channel. And we are here today for another episode of Story Time with Bret. For those of you who don't know what Story Time with Bret is, it's a series of episodes where Bret is going to share something that he experienced during his career in aviation as an aircraft maintenance engineer, aircraft manager, and airworthiness inspector for different civil aviation authorities. So, in this episode, I understand we are going to talk about the importance of reporting defects.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I leave it to you.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics because there are so many different perspectives that different people have about it, and some people don't actually give it enough thought. In my mind, I don't think at all. So one of the first things I share with different people is why it's important to record defects appropriately. And aside from the fact that pretty much every aviation regulation requires whoever finds a defect to enter the defect into the technical record for the aircraft, that's a requirement. So if a pilot finds something, he should be entering it. If maintenance finds something, they should be entering it. And where they enter it can be different, but nonetheless, it should be entered. And that's the defect, not the rectification. That's a completely separate item, and that will be part of all of this. But it's important to know what the problem was before it's fixed. So what I've seen a lot of times in logbooks is a rectification, a wheel changed or a battery changed or different parts changed, but they don't say why. And that becomes really important from a continuing airworthiness perspective and understanding whether defects are ongoing or not. For instance, if a circuit breaker pops in flight, it's okay. It's standard procedure to reset the circuit breaker once. Circuit breaker pops again, it's questionable whether they should be resetting it again, but sometimes they do. But say it only pops the once and they reset the circuit breaker. I've found that there's a big tendency to not enter that into the logbook. Mm-hmm. Well, from a continuing airworthiness perspective, of course, you're well aware, there's a need to monitor recurring defects. So if a circuit breaker has popped 7 times for 7 different crew members on 7 different flights, and nobody ever entered it, does it meet the recurring defect criteria? Probably not, because it hasn't been recorded that it's been popping. If one person enters it, but it's actually popped on every flight for the last 7 flights, it doesn't qualify as a recurring defect. But where you may have a real issue going on with the aircraft, right? Another area that I've found, right from the flight schools where they start learning how to fly, there's a tendency for a lot of flight schools to tell student pilots, don't enter defects in the logbook, because the thinking, I can only imagine from the flight instructor's point of view, is that the students don't really know the aircraft, they don't know the machine, and they can't tell whether it's an actual defect or not. I've seen where students will enter a certain radio doesn't work or whatever, and it turns out to be what we refer to as finger problems. They push the wrong button, or they fail to understand that they needed to push a button because their processes haven't been embedded to that degree yet. So
I would like to interject here because you are talking about for flight school to not enter. That sometimes maybe the instructor, or there is an unspoken rule that you don't enter defects, right? Because you're still in training and you don't really know what you're doing. So you may enter a defect that is not really a defect, and you're going to mess up the entire schedule, right? However, I do have to say it happened to me one day that I flew with 2 friends, and that was the first time that I flew with the other 2 people on board. I did a hard landing, and I was going to report it, but the person, the maintenance manager of the flight club, saw my hard landing, so we were talking about it, and then I said, do you want me to enter in the logbook because I was going to do that. And he said, no, don't do it. I'll deal with it. You know, and you know, we had this conversation on this example other times. You pointed out an interesting fact that aside from not allowing the defect to be reported in the logbook, also as a maintenance manager, how do you justify an inspection for hard landing if there was no hard landing reported?
Well, exactly. I mean, it's important to understand. It's typically the person that identifies the defect or the occurrence or whatever the case might be is the one responsible for entering it into the aircraft record. Not necessarily logbook, but in the aircraft record. So in that case, the pilot experienced the hard landing. He should be reporting exactly what happened, because, I mean, maybe it wasn't even a hard landing. If you report the speed that you were coming in at and you know, all of the circumstances surrounding that, they may be able to write it off as, well, you know what, it really wasn't an issue, doesn't qualify as a hard landing, let's move on. Or it might be, oh yeah, we really need to take a look at this, right? But getting back to that, so I've seen instances where, you know, 737 will come in at the end of the day from flying commercially all day long, and the typically maintenance meets the aircraft. They ask the pilots, you know, how's everything? What's, you know, are there any problems? And the pilot hands a sticky note to maintenance and says, we had a generator trip offline. He didn't write it in the logbook. He gives him a sticky note. So maintenance, oh, thanks, you know, and he sets it on the pedestal, goes off and does other things, because typically with a commercial airline, you have more than one airplane you're taking care of. And so the next morning, they're getting ready for dispatch, and the defect hasn't been addressed. So now you've got operations saying, well, maintenance didn't fix the airplane. But maintenance says, well, I didn't see anything in the logbook. You know, maybe there was a shift change. Maybe the person they handed the sticky note to didn't, you know, you could be on a team of a bunch of people and that person never made it back to the aircraft. There's all kinds of reasons why it should be in the logbook.
Or maybe the sticky note just flew away, you know?
Exactly. So it's important to put that in the logbook. You know, I've seen other instances where, you know, another aspect is it's important to input in your entry why there's a problem or what the defect was. I've seen, I don't know how many instances where number 3 main wheel changed. Why? You know, the regulations typically say that whoever discovers a defect, whether it's the pilot or maintenance, enters the defect into the technical record. So if I as a regulator come and look at this, I go, okay, number 3 main wheel was changed on this Boeing aircraft. Why? Was it worn to limits? Was it because overnight the pressure went to 0 and so they had to replace the wheel? I've seen that happen. The thing is, that can have an impact into the actual outcome of what needs to be done to the aircraft, you know?
This is an interesting one because I had an aircraft that it was exactly what was happening. And we asked question, and what came out is that because of the runway and the configuration of everything, the pilot had to do a very tight turn, so the wheel was getting
scrubbed off.
So, but that is important. I know it seems like a small thing, but under an aircraft management point of view, if I know that we have this problem and there is really very little to nothing that you can do in this particular case, well, I can plan appropriately the tire changes, for example, right?
Exactly. So that has it impacts different people. Continuing airworthiness management. In the case where, for instance, you have a number 3 main wheel go to 0 pressure, the manufacturer, Boeing, is very adamant that number 4 has to also be changed out, because the pressure that is put on number 4 main wheel, if number 3 is 0 pressure, is too great. That number 4 wheel could have been overstressed. So now you have to change out both 3 and 4, if that were the case. But if it were only what tire was worn to limits, that's absolutely normal, you know? It could be a flat spot, it could be a number of things. And it may have other implications, but unless you know the actual defect, the reason it's being written up as a defect, it's, even if you convey the reason to the maintainer, and the maintainer takes the appropriate action, continuing airworthiness doesn't have the full story to understand what needs to be paid attention to going forward, right? So there's all of these pieces.
Yes, and when we talk about continued airworthiness, and I'd like to clarify this just because we may have different people from different background watching at this. It's whoever is managing the airworthiness task. So aircraft come with things to do, different tasks, and those tasks needs to be accomplished. So there must be someone who is managing all of these tasks, planning them, schedule them, and reset the system, and so on and so forth. So it can be an airworthiness engineer, it can be an AME, it can be an aircraft management company, it can be a number of different things. But it's important because it's going to affect not only not reporting defects is a problem because the regulation tells you that you have to report defects. You don't know the status of the aircraft if you don't report defects. And that is going to have a catastrophic, maybe sometimes catastrophic effect on all other groups. So if I don't know that there is a problem, I cannot do anything. And maybe the aircraft is going to get stuck in a place because now the problem, is in front of everybody. So you can move the aircraft. I can get maintenance there. So there are a lot of things attached to all of these issues.
Yeah, the very important aspects. And, related to that, what I've also seen as a regulator is a lot of aircraft go down for major inspections or maintenance checks annually or whatever the interval is. And I'll go through the logbooks looking for defects, and there's no defects whatsoever until the last flight into the maintenance facility, because the aircraft's been nowhere near maintenance. So nobody's been writing defects in the logbook, and they know that it's going in and they'll get everything fixed. So now all of a sudden they write them all in, and the aircraft will arrive with 30 defects. Some of them that were clearly there prior to that last flight into maintenance. So that's just completely not acceptable.
Yeah, that happened to me too. I had a business jet that went for maintenance. We were going to change registration. And so we go into the maintenance facility, and we have a whole bunch of things to take care of, all unscheduled. They were all defects that nobody reported it. And then so the bill was this long, the amount was crazy, and the owner came to us and say, what is happening?
Absolutely.
But if you don't report it at the end of the day, not only the defect may, like corrosion, for example, may become very, very serious, but also now you have this big bill to pay.
Well, it's not just the bill. I've seen you working on different projects where exactly that has happened, where the aircraft goes in for maintenance, and all of a sudden the pilot that's been with the aircraft for the last 6 months gives you this list of items. Some of them may require getting parts or setting up certain maintenance events to happen. And you have already planned a time slot, a work scope, based on what you know of the aircraft, but you didn't know about all of this stuff. So now all of a sudden, potentially the aircraft is grounded because you need to accomplish some work where you don't have the parts or the equipment or the facilities. And maybe the facility that the aircraft went down to wasn't appropriate because they couldn't accomplish some work that needed to be done.
Yeah, and somebody has to make the call to the owner and say, hey, you can't fly, sorry.
Right. And interestingly, a lot of times it's continuing airworthiness' fault.
Yeah, exactly. But if I don't know, there is nothing that I can do. And there are situations like with corrosion. I really hate that because you don't know. You have to try to clean it up a little bit to see exactly the unless it's obviously evident in front of your eyes. I remember with this aircraft, the maintainer was telling me, we should remove a little bit and see what the status is, and that can be a big problem. So you are there like this, okay, what is going on?
Yeah. No, it's important to understand the status of the aircraft. I mean, it's a requirement to report it. It doesn't do anybody any favors by brushing stuff under the carpet. I took I took a position as director of maintenance with an organization one time, and there was a short period where they were in between directors of maintenance. So the aviation manager for the department was responsible for continuing airworthiness. And when I came on board, there were all kinds of maintenance tasks that simply hadn't been accomplished. I mean, the scheduled stuff was all scheduled because that's what he did. He looked at the camp run and talked to the maintainer and booked the aircraft in to have certain things done. But he was afraid to write any defects because he had nobody there to address them, you know.
Well, that's a very interesting one, because all of this is also affected by the type of environment you're working in. So, for example, shipboard operations that we do, sometimes you have clients who have an aircraft maintenance engineer on board, so there is somebody who can deal with these things. Sometimes there is nobody. So again, what you just said actually happens, you know, that the pilot doesn't report anything until they are in a maintenance facility, which can be, you know, months away, because normally, you know, we go from April until October. The helicopter is on the yacht, and the yacht is all over the world. So that's a problem. But also, there is also another aspect that even if you have an aircraft maintenance engineer there, it doesn't necessarily have all the tools he needs, the appropriate space, environment, and but still, you do have to report defects. It's very important, because you have to be able to address what's going on and the possible impact that the defect can have on other things.
Oh, absolutely.
And here we can talk about MEL items, minimum equipment list items.
We can jump off on all kinds of tangents that are related, and I agree, but I think it's just important to understand what we talked about to start with, and that is the importance of writing up defects, entering them in the appropriate record. That's to say, you know, if you're a pilot and you discover a defect, or you have an encounter that needs to be recorded, the normal place would be the logbook. If you're a maintainer and the aircraft's down for maintenance and you discover something, it might be appropriate to make that entry directly into the work package, for not necessarily in the logbook. Whatever it is, you know, that'll be driven by the organizations and the operators' processes and procedures, but they have to be recorded.
Yeah, I wonder if it is also, it's a problem that comes from a lack of training. You know, maybe some pilots, for example, don't know that if the breakers gets triggered, you have to report it, or...
Well, I don't think, it could be, but I mean, I would think that it's normal for a pilot to understand that a breaker popping is a defect. And even though you may be able to reset, you're entitled to one reset and the problem goes away, you should still record it. Because again, you know, it could qualify as a recurring defect, because you might not be on the next flight when it pops again and again and again, right? So, and these things do happen, there's no question.
Okay, so I think the important message here is to report defects. In the appropriate logbook, not only because the regulation tells you that you have to do it, but also because if you don't report the defects, you don't know what's going on, and you can't really have a clear picture of the status of the aircraft. And not having a clear picture of the status of the aircraft means that things can happen, and they normally happen in situations where you don't have the people available, you don't have the material, you don't have the facility. And it's important to understand that it affects everybody around you. This is what we talk about aircraft management, and the reason why we wrote the book Introduction to Aircraft Management is because managing aircraft is not a one-man show, but it's a team effort. So everybody has to report what they see, what they experience, so that all of this data can be managed in order to manage not only safely the aircraft, but also appropriately and efficiently, because we all want for the aircraft to fly, and to fly without problems. I mean, without problems, you know, very often is not possible, but at least have a smooth operations. Okay, so I think we can go on and on and on this topic, and I'm sure that we will have other episodes about it because it's a very wide topic and there are a lot of different things that we talk about. So, but I think it was important to do an episode like this and to try to give a few examples of what no reporting defects means and why you should.
Yeah, there are just a very few examples. Like you say, we could go on, and I think it's important for anybody watching this is to think about instances where maybe they should have written something in the logbook and they didn't, And one of my pet peeves is to see rectifications in the logbook, but not see why.
Yeah.
It's an unfair situation for everybody.
Yeah, and the rectification is another aspect that we could talk about. Maybe we will do another episode about it because that it goes into the also reliability data and how to manage aircraft. So it's all another word. So for now, if you found this episode interesting, please consider to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and share a comment. We would like to know if these things happen to you too. What are your thoughts about it? And you can know more about us on our website, cacglobalsolutions.com. We have a podcast. It's called Aviation Perspectives with C.A.C. We publish once a month, and we talk about all things aviation, particularly related to aircraft management. We had an interview with the Isle of Man Aircraft Registry about the regulations and all the pieces that need to be in place to manage M-registered aircraft. We talk about business aviation, ISBO, and IBAC with Scott McPherson, founder of trainingport.net. And we had another very interesting interview with Adam Bacchus about aircraft certification process. It was a lengthy interview. It's 2 hours interview, but it's really, really interesting. And we really would like to have your feedback on that interview because we'd like to do more episodes about aircraft certification. So for now, thank you so much for watching, and bye for now.
Bye.
We had an interview with the aircraft Isle of. Hi everyone, I'm Annalisa from C.A.C. Global Solutions. We are aircraft management. We are.